Hi, I'm Nicholas McGurr, author of The Afterlife and host for Stories in a Cemetery. You can find all my fiction works with themes of the afterlife on nicholasmcgurr.com. That's NICHOLASMCGIRR.com. As a writer, I do research, and that research is more than likely inside a haunted location or a cemetery. Like you, I'm curious about the afterlife, and always looking for a new topic for my next book. I hope you enjoy this episode of my research as much as I did in using it for my fiction works. Let's get into today's story in the cemetery. Hey guys, it's Nicholas McGurr, author of The Afterlife, and welcome back to Stories in the Cemetery, episode 8. So we're getting closer to that 10 mark, double digits. Pretty excited about that, and can't thank you guys enough, as always, for following along and listening to some of my crazy adventures with looking for some spirit activity and, of course, research for my books, because that's what this is all about for me. I love sharing these stories with you guys, and, you know, a lot of this is just research. I love being inspired by original, real stories while I go visit some haunted locations, and they give me inspiration. So I do write about the afterlife, and of course you could check all of that out on my website, nicholasmcgurr.com. But today, guys, we are talking about Old Sheldon Church. It's also known as the Prince William's Parish Church. So when you're searching for this, I wanted to use Old Sheldon Church because that's kind of the urban legend name that was given to it, you know, from the city of Beaufort, and that is in South Carolina. So Beaufort, not to be confused with Beaufort, which I can't remember what state that's in, but Beaufort, South Carolina. There are plenty of hauntings down there. I wanted to check out this Old Sheldon Church. I've been reading about it for a while. So me, Byron, April, my wife, and a third person actually went to go visit the grounds. So, and the title of this, with Spirit Shoes at Old Sheldon Church, it has some relevance, I promise you. So just hang in there. This is it's an interesting story, to say the least. But let's talk about the grounds first, and a little bit about the history. And that way you can kind of see why I wanted to go visit this place. It's free to go to. It's not one of those paid sites where you have a tour guide and somebody starts talking about all the history and reading some of the headstones and that kind of thing. It's a free-for-all. You walk in, and it's gorgeous. It's covered with mossy oaks. So if you've never been to South Carolina, you know, we have a lot of mossy oaks down here, and you can kind of tell the older areas, not by the palmetto trees, but by the oaks that we have. So when you go to any plantation or any historical site, you're probably going to find some mossy oaks around, and Old Sheldon Church is no different. It's covered and littered with it. All the pictures I even took, and that April took, you know, you can't help but get some of those oaks in there. But enough about the trees. So when you walk in, it's kind of an old gate. I don't know how old the gate is, but it looks pretty aged. But when you walk in, there's like a water pump that still works, and it's interesting because what's it used for? Of course, back in the day, I'm sure that it was put in for a specific reason, but it does work. We did test it. It was just part of the fun of going to this location. But the great thing about this, and the reason why I wanted to go, was because at the church, it's not a church that actually has a roof still or any innards of it. Like it's just the posts, the brick posts, the base of the building, really. And you can even see the burn marks along the top. So if you look up pictures of this or visit my website, you'll see the header for this. You could see all of the burning marks along the top of what remains of the building. So that was an interesting sight. So I mean, when you walk into the church, you go past the four posts. You're walking into basically just a small sanctuary without any type of roof or walls or anything. It's just the posts and the arches that are, you know, still remain. So that was super interesting. But the reason why this place was burned, I wanted to get into that. And it wasn't, you know, destroyed once, but it was destroyed twice. 2 different wars. You know, and I did some research to find out why and why, you know, these things have happened to this, you know, specific church. So It was originally built in the 1740s and 50s, and it was burned by the British Army in 1779 and then rebuilt in 1826. And then it was burned again by the Federal Army in 1865. So just to kind of clarify some of that, scriptureproject.org, they give you a nice brief history. So I'm going to go ahead and read that just because it explains part of why this church was burned down twice. Scriptureproject.org reads, originally organized and funded in the 1740s and 50s by William Bull, whose Newberry plantation bordered the church grounds. The church was set on fire in 1779 by British troops led by General Augustine Prevost. Could be any kind of pronunciation. That's Prevost. During the Revolutionary War. Tradition states that on January 14, 1865, near the end of the Civil War, General Sherman's troops burned the church a second time as part of his March to the Sea campaign. So you could see during two wars, the Revolutionary and the Civil War, this poor church was burned twice. And through some of the stories that I found online as well, you'll see that some people state that it wasn't necessarily just burned down, but the materials from the building were taken, from the locals to kind of maintain their own homes. Looking at some pictures and early drawings of this building, it did have a lot of like housing structures that could have been used. So where the remains of the inside of the building went to, I have no idea. There's nothing anywhere that states where, say, the pews or the altar of said church would actually go to. But that was the reason why. Like, it's been burned twice. So I'm guessing, and I'm sure in my assumption, there's a lot of truth to that, that there were some deaths that happened on the grounds of Old Sheldon Church. That was kind of the big deal. There are a lot of reports from, some locals, some people that visit haunted locations like myself that say they've had experiences with a lady in a brown dress that kind of protects over her child's grave. So, of course, I didn't do a ton of research, like always. I kind of get a little gist of what's happening there, and I kind of do a lot of research afterwards to see if anything makes sense. Now, again, if you've been listening, you know that I did a lot of research with Psychic back in 2012 to 2014. This was not one of those trips. This just happened a few months ago. So you know who's been there. It was me, my wife, Byron, my dog, and a third person that was not psychic. So I will tell you, what these folks were doing for this article that I wrote and for this podcast. So really cool stuff. We kind of had a gist of the lady in the brown dress, but we really weren't looking for her. And as we kind of all separated and explored the grounds, we couldn't help but notice that the headstones were all kind of scattered around randomly, some facing others. There were small groups put together, but it just seemed completely random. So I'm going to get into that here in just a minute. But I want to tell you why this was such an interesting case for me, if you want to call them cases now, since I've been doing so many. But we wanted to try something a little different, and I tested a couple of apps they were apps for my phone. One of them was an EMF detector app, and an EMF is an electromagnetic field, in case you're unfamiliar, and that is said to gauge if there is any spiritual activity around you. Now, I was kind of curious. I wanted to test this on my phone and see if it would actually work. So I downloaded it, and I started putting it near electrical appliances and anything that had electronics to it in my home, and lo and behold, all the meter from the phone actually started working. So I could see the yellow and the red lights. The stronger the magnetic field, obviously it goes into the red, but it actually worked. I don't know how it works. It's one of those weird, crazy things. Didn't know my phone could be an EMF detector. But instead of purchasing one like a regular electrician would, I downloaded the app, and lo and behold, it worked. So I will note that even though we used this EMF detector app while on the site of Old Sheldon Church, we didn't find anything. So the meter did not move at all as we were, walking around the grounds. nothing came of note at all. So, guys, this is the real deal. I only give you, information that is it's real. I'm not trying to hype anything up. I only give you evidence that I find and some of the research that I do as a writer to kind of make sense of things that actually happen while I'm on a location. So, this EMF thing, even though it was kind of a cool thing, it didn't do anything for us. So the second app that I tried, and yes, it's a very cliche, cheesy name of Ghost Detector. Now, Ghost Detector is meant to be used as a spirit box. Now, if you're unfamiliar with a spirit box will use like radio frequencies or white noise, to allow spirit activity to kind of come through in words. Now, if you've watched any of like these ghost hunting shows, I'm sure you've seen a spirit box that actually says the word back to them, and you've heard the white noise, and it's annoying. And if you've never dealt with one, it truly is annoying. If you've watched those kind of shows, I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. But we did use it for quite a while, and I tested this app at home first, like I did with the EMF detector, and I just kind of watched it for about an hour or so, just to see what it would come up with. I just set it on a coffee table and just kind of sat there and gauged, what it was doing. It came up with random words. About every 5 to 10 minutes, it would come up with a new word, and they were all random. Nothing made sense. To my knowledge, there's no history of any hauntings here in my apartment building. So it was just kind of like, all right, this could either be a game, this could be a hoax, this could be just for fun, this could be a party game, that kind of thing. But lo and behold, it was giving me white noise. It was giving me frequencies. So I figured, why not? I'll take it to Old Sheldon Church when we are going to make our visit. And just because it was providing the white noise, I thought, let's see what happens. I was really, really curious. So we did get something. We got quite a bit, actually. But as I go further through this, you're going to see that one word in particular, shoes, actually made sense. And it was completely random. But, as I research through things, that I will find something. And I kept going and going and wanting to make this a valid visit. I did not want to provide a ghost story to you, the listener, and not have any kind of proof or evidence. So on my website with the blog post, you will actually see the screenshots that I took from, because the app does give you a word history list. So some of these things that we thought would have been super interesting to look up. The first word that it gave us was apparition, which I thought, oh, okay, maybe we're actually going to see something. And then every 2 to 3 minutes, we would get more words. So remember, when I tested this app at home, I was getting words every 5 to 10 minutes. Now that we were on site and on location, this was giving us words every minute or two. So super interesting. And we found a lot. A lot of this stuff doesn't make any sense, that I couldn't find anything. So sour was one of the terms. Master, alcohol, none of this stuff made sense at all. So one thing we did take note of was that the name Randy came up twice. So it was about a 5 to 6 minute interval that those came across. And there were words in between, but it did come up twice. And so I started digging for, anything on Randy, anybody with the middle name of Randy, anything with Randy in it. I found nothing. So I went to, graveyard.com and find a graveyard. I found nothing. I looked through the whole listing of everybody buried on the grounds, and there was nobody with the name of Randy or had a middle name of Randy. I even looked for Randall. It just seemed very prominent since it came up twice. So it was just one of those things I wanted to point out again, that even though it came up twice, I found nothing. It could be relevant. Who knows? There could be something there. I don't know. But I started looking for other things. My son was another phrase that came up. That was super interesting. And then find him came up just a few minutes before that. Of course, again, with words in between, but find him and my son, that seems like something that could have happened, could have occurred at Old Sheldon Church. I mean, the history of this goes back to the 1700s. Who knows what could have came out of this? But the word shoes, the shoes thing, kind of all right, I wasn't really looking for it, but I stumbled upon it. So doing all this research, on the property, on Beaufort, on William Bull and his wife Ann Bull, which were the original owners of the church, I came across a book called Wicked Beaufort, and that's by Alexia Jones Helsey. So with that, I couldn't help but notice, like I'm reading through these articles, and guys, I do a lot of research on this stuff, and especially if I stumble across something, it's not something I was searching for. It was just one of those, all right, that kind of makes sense now. But the word shoes, really? The word shoes? Like, that makes no sense at all for anything that would have happened, any of the tragedies that would have happened back in the 1700s. So, again, with the word shoes, inside this book, I found this small chapter, and I'm just going to go ahead and read it to you until we get to the shoe portion. So it does make complete sense of why this would show up on the Spirit Box app called Ghost Detector. So from the book, Wicked Beaufort, it reads, title of Yamasee War. The greatest early challenge to the new town was the Yamasee War of 1715 to 16. During the winter of 1684 to 85, the Yamasee relocated from Florida to the Carolina Low Country. The peoples known as the Yamasee included several affiliated Native American groups such as the Guale, or the Gual. I'm probably mispronouncing this. Somebody please correct me. Different factions within the Yamasee had their own chiefs. One of the better known of these leaders was Huspa Chief, leader of the Huspa faction of the Yamasee. Now, so far, that's just kind of a history of what the war was about. So, you're probably like, why does this even relate to shoes or anything dealing with Old Sheldon Church? So, there was an attack, and 2 of the men survived this attack. One of these, Seymour Burroughs, although seriously wounded, shot through the mouth and back, escaped to warn the inhabitants of Port Royal Island. The alerted settlers boarded a ship docked at Beaufort, and in a rain of arrows set sail for Charlestown. Now, if you don't know anything about Charleston, we used to be called Charlestown, so after King Charles. Native warriors burned the town of Beaufort, killed over 100 settlers in the area, and captured others. A few of these captives survived their ordeal and eventually were returned to South Carolina. Most did not. For example, Colonel John Bull donated communion silver to St. Helena's Church in memory of his first wife, who was kidnapped by the Yamasee. Except for her shoes, no trace of the unfortunate woman was ever found. Now, come on. Seriously, that was pretty random. Nothing but her shoes was found, and that word just happened to come up in some app that is meant to be a game or a hoax. So I have to say honestly, guys, that this shows a little bit of validity that there was something going on while I was at Old Sheldon Church. Now, the time frames don't exactly match up with the Old Sheldon Church being in the 1700s, and this actually happened back in the 1600s, but let's face it. Guys, John Bull had to be an ascendant of William Bull and Anne Bull. So, was somebody else trying to come through? I don't know. I can't say for sure. All I know is that the word shoes and this randomly showing up during my research makes complete sense. So, I'm claiming, honestly, that something is going on at Old Sheldon Church, and that's my story, and I'm going to stick to it. So, the other thing that, like I said before, that we noted was that the headstones around the gravesite, actually on the entire grounds, they were all randomly placed, but they were also either sinking, which we have very soft ground here in South Carolina, so I could kind of see the sinking portion of it, but a lot of them were cracked, they were damaged. Some of them were missing pieces altogether where it was hard to read. Guys, it just seemed like something weird was going on with this whole thing. The fact that everything was kind of random around the grounds. There was not an actual formal cemetery where you walk in and all the headstones are faced the same way, oldest to newest, families put together. The only really thing that we saw that was, could be normal was the some of the families were actually put together, but they were still kind of random. So check out the pics on my website. I did write an article about this, as I always do. It's called Blog Show Notes on my website. That's nicholasmcgurr.com. This week's book sponsor, guys, is The Umbrella Tree. That is one of my novelettes, one of 3. Be sure to check that out also on my website. That is under the Tree Collection. There are 3 books in that series. So, guys, I hope you find this story very interesting. The shoes thing, it just got my head spinning. I know it sounds weird, and it's small, and it's, it could be reaching with this, but at the same token, guys, it's too coincidental that word came up on this game app, and that I found a story based around the Bull family where John Bull's wife wasn't found except for her shoes. Too weird. Guys, if you had an experience, I want to hear about it. If you've been to Old Sheldon Church, or if you visited there, if you had an experience there, please leave me notes in the comments. And of course, you can always join the Facebook group for Stories in the Cemetery. I made the tag at Stories in the Cemetery so you can easily find it. So let's share some ghost stories, and I will see you guys on the next episode. Thanks so much for listening. I'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks so much for listening to today's Story in the Cemetery. Be sure to check out the show notes with pictures and bonus audio sections on nicholasmcgurr.com. As you know, I'm a writer, and now you have another story that inspires me to write my fiction works. Be sure to share this episode on your social media or leave me comments on the Stories in the Cemetery Facebook page. I'll see you next time with another Story in the Cemetery.